Welcome. Today we've got a very special guest who I've known for many, many years, and I'm a great admirer of him and his work. Robert H. Knight, who's a writer. He writes for the Washington Times in Washington. Up above is his most recent column, Democrats' Moderately Liberal Mask Slipping Off. And he wrote a significant number of the young, however, are rejecting campus indoctrination and discovering American exceptionalism and faith in the God of the Bible. Much of the credit for this goes to Charlie Kirk, who in 2012 founded Turning Point USA, a conservative outreach to campuses. A devout Christian, Kirk helped launch a counter-revolution, teaching students how to answer lies. Unbelievably sharp and articulate, he posed a great threat to the left's grip over students. And I want to say one thing. Bob and I did a YouTube video some years ago, which was banned by YouTube. And in response, he did another YouTube video with me, how to answer charges with grace and class. I can't even remember the name, but it was a wonderful
Truth, actually.
explanation. Grace
Truth and love. Yeah.
Truth and love.
Truth and grace.
And it was
truth and
truth
grace.
and grace. But the idea was,
Yeah.
it was a Christian perspective where you would have a dialogue with those who attack you,
Right.
and you show them simply the error of their arguments and help persuade them and convert them. Basically, evangelical approach. And I thought of this at the time Charlie Kirk was killed. I wasn't that familiar with him because I'm much older, and but of course, afterwards, I watched a lot of videos, including him with Jordan Peterson, which was fascinating for over an hour. And it seemed to me he was doing exactly what Bob said needed to be done in that video. So Bob wrote, last week his powerful voice was shockingly silenced when a sniper shot him at a Utah college. Mr. Kirk, 31, left behind his wife and two young children. So let's start out by talking about Charlie Kirk. You were in the same circles, although you told me you weren't friends. You did speak at a Turning Point rally in Washington. Could you tell me a little bit about that? Hello?
George Washington University. To a very friendly audience, because it was all students that believed in the Turning Point USA message. A lot of them were wearing buttons. Socialism sucks, which I thought was a little vulgar, but its point is spot on. And they were in marked contrast to the larger student body at GW, which, like Georgetown or American University, or just liberal hothouses. Churning out liberal activists. But I didn't get to meet Charlie. I'd gone to events at which he spoke. I spoke at one of his at Turning Point USA, but I admired him and I watched him rise as a conservative star. And the thing about Charlie is he did something no one else had done, which was take the message to the campuses. Because as far as political organizing, and Peter Navarro pointed this out in a Washington Times column the other day, that yes, other organizers were extraordinary over the last couple decades. And he pointed to David Axelrod for Barack Obama's rise and Ralph Reed, who contributed greatly to getting evangelical Christians in the Republican fold. He said, but Charlie came along and Ralph Reed didn't need to convince the evangelicals about the rightness of the policy positions. He just had to get them off their couches and into activating and voting. Charlie went into completely hostile atmospheres, and just through sheer goodwill and logic and having the facts at his command and an extraordinary vocabulary and articulation, just disarmed all the people who came up against him. I just watched one of his videos this morning, where is a woman who was obviously very disturbed She had, half her head shaved, and she was all into the whole alternative lifestyle thing. And she was questioning Charlie about his pro-life stance. And she said, "Look, I had an abortion, and I'm glad I did because I have mental issues and I don't want to bring children into the world and saddle them with my problems." And Charlie very gently said, "Well, you're kind of selling yourself short. What makes you think that this is permanent? What makes you think God isn't great enough to heal you? God is a healing uh, agent. God can redeem and heal. So don't give up on yourself." I mean, this is a very gentle, loving message. That's what he was shot for, things like that. I mean, although the left will say, well, no, it wasn't rhetoric like that. It was his calling out transgender violence and making it seem as if all transgenders are violently prone. No, he didn't. He just told the truth about the spate of violence that's convulsed various areas in the country and the disproportionate number of transgender individuals who have committed these crimes. Um, but above all, he was a big threat to the Democrats' hegemony over the college campuses. Nobody else had come in and just turned a lot of young people to the idea that they could question the liberal orthodoxy. Charlie questioned it. He took it apart with sheer logic, and the kids responded. This was very disturbing to the political left of this country.
It's interesting because nobody seems to be more of a paradigmatic champion of free speech than Charlie Kirk. And tragically and ironically, he was assassinated while answering a question about trans violence by allegedly someone connected to the trans community. So it just seems an irony of fate that this is the moment that ended his life and his ability to reach students. And now, yet, the other side, the Democratic Party, seems to be cheering the people who killed Charlie Kirk and accusing the Trump administration of being anti free speech when they just rubbed out somebody whose only crime was speaking freely on campus.
Yeah.
Is this going to be a successful strategy to cow the Republicans?
I think the Democrats are in deep trouble because the uh, gulf between the two worldviews in this country has been no more starkly illustrated than the Charlie Kirk shooting. When George Floyd was killed in 2020, allegedly by an officer, but the media ignored the fentanyl in his system and so forth. The left applauded riots that broke out in hundreds of cities and cost many lives and billions in damage. And Charlie Kirk, who is uh, not a criminal, he was a good Christian man who loved his wife and kids and was gently trying to instruct students about how to argue rightly, was gunned down by a transgender activist. And so, what was the response? It wasn't rioting, it wasn't protests, it was millions of people literally around the country holding prayer vigils and praying for Charlie and for his killer and the killer's family. And this is, I think people can't cover this up. I don't think the media is able to cover this up. They're now screaming that the Trump administration is using Charlie Kirk's death to crack down on free speech in this country, which is nonsense. They are saying that there's a right wing counter revolution that's interested in censoring all speech, which is a lie. And they have made much of the dismissal of Jimmy Kimmel, whose show was suspended this past week because he blatantly lied about the shooter, saying he was in the MAGA community, which is nonsense. His parents were Republicans, and his dad even turned him in when he found out he was the shooter. And the suspect had become radicalized in college and went further and further out and was living with his gay lover who was transitioning to female. And Kimball covered all that up and made him out to be a MAGA person. That's such a blatant lie. It's disgusting. And he should have been pulled, I think. And the network had every right to do that because he represents
Well,
the ABC Disney network. It's their call, not the government's. It's their call.
well, let me go further than that. I mean, President Trump complained, but the FCC actually, under law, has two standards they can use for license holders. One is the public interest standard, that the programming has to be in the public interest. And that's, we're getting back into what we used to do when we were at Heritage, the media, but that's very rarely been applied. I think only one station that was anti-integration in the South in the 60s that blocked pro-integration programming had its license yanked under the public interest standard. But it made an example, and the networks were a little careful in the old days. Uh, and Brendan Carr, head of the FCC, said, "We're doing this under the public interest standard because
Right.
we can take away their licenses for their affiliates." The other standard, which someone I know says don't go there, is the moral unfitness standard. That was used to shut down the RKO General network, which had made an illegal contribution to President Nixon's campaign. Those stations later became Fox, but there was a big period there was nothing. I would argue that this is both against the public interest and shows that the ABC Disney network affiliates are airing morally unfit programming. And if they're deliberate lies designed to incite hatred, it would seem to me that not only is it against the public interest, but the holders of those licenses are morally unfit. The people who are promulgating essentially wire fraud. But that's my career. I just want to talk about something else.
Okay.
You have a write up in Wikipedia, and this killing unfortunately does raise the trans issue as much as people don't want to discuss it. And you had said, and it's interesting also, Charlie is a Christian activist. To me, he looks like an evangelist, sort of like a Billy Graham Campus Crusade for Christ type when I was young, crossed with a young Republican. It's funny you said nobody did this before. I remember when I was young, there were the Young Republicans and there was Young Americans for Freedom, and they had tables on campus, but somehow they don't seem to have been anywhere nearly as effective as Charlie Kirk. So I think he had charisma, he had intelligence, he had talent that, is a gift from God, as Wrestling Lawyer said. He said on loan from God. I think this was a gift. Here's your Wikipedia write-up. Quote, Knight has stated, the end goal of gay activism is the criminalization of Christianity. Did you actually say that? And do you stand by that?
I said that in many places, and I stand by it because if the gay activists and now the transgender activists get everything they want, they will have completely subverted the moral worldview of America and really Western civilization, which goes way back to a respect for truth, respect for the Bible. If what they're trying to do is redefine biblical morality as a form of bigotry actionable under the law. They have used the civil rights laws, which were intended to redress the real grievances of black people in America who were enslaved and then had suffered under the Democrats' Jim Crow laws. Once they expanded that to behavior, they entered the moral realm and were pushing the idea that what you do is who you are, and therefore it's just like race, which nobody has any control over. It's immutable. And they were saying, well, it doesn't even matter anymore that it's immutable. And we are claiming the same rights to impose our views on everyone, or we'll go after you. They use the civil rights laws like a big bludgeon. And I remember talking to Heidi Feldblum, who is a prominent gay activist. She was at Georgetown Law Center, and I was at a debate where she was, and she was making the case that Tufts University was justified in throwing the Christian group off campus because they wouldn't allow homosexuals as leaders in the Christian group. which had a whole different set of values. And she was fine with that. And I said, well, I thought you believed in free speech and so forth. And she said, well, this is a zero-sum game. And I will quote her. She said, gays win, Christians lose. And she smiled at me. I thought she was one of the more honest LGBTQ activists I'd ever run into, because she knew that once you reframe traditional morality as a form of bigotry, then you can bring the full weight of the civil rights apparatus against it. And of course, we've seen that in recent years, and an upsurge since the 2015 Obergefell ruling by the Supreme Court that out of whole cloth created the federal right to gay marriage. Then you saw Jack Phillips, the Masterpiece Cake Bake Shop owner in Colorado, persecuted by the local authorities and state authorities. It took two cases at the Supreme Court for him to be freed from that. They kept going after him. Reason is, if you decline to celebrate or accommodate any view or assertion by the LGBTQ crowd, you will be punished legally, civilly, and they hope criminally. So that's what this game is all about ultimately, and it has to be stopped. It has to be turned back because the only place it can go is into criminal penalties now. And a lot of Christians and Jews who are observant don't understand this. They don't see the threat. They think, well, we can all get along. We can all get along if the other side will stop uh, using the system to persecute people who disagree with them and stop shooting people like Charlie Kirk.
Well, let me pick up on that. Um, there's some videos of Charlie Kirk on the gay thing, and it's basically, it seems to me his position was, you can do what you like. He said he started out as a libertarian, but you know, leave me alone. I have the right to live my life the way I want, and I think people should be getting married and having children and going to church. And is there not, you said if they stop, well, they're not going to stop unless somebody stops them. Is there any way to use the civil rights law that currently exists, which has to protect Christians as well, and say, look, this was a civil rights violation. This is designed to create a chilling effect against Christianity by killing a major Christian leader on campus who testifies to his faith all the time.
Yeah.
And to use this to go after those very organizations that are fomenting anti-Christian violence and hate speech against Christians and so forth. In other words, to use the laws that they've put in and the court decisions they've put in as a precedent to stop them using the legal means. And it's a very short time that President Trump has, like 3 years, but to break up their organizations the same way for example, the Klan was broken up, and to force them to recognize the right of Christians to worship God in their own way under their own rules.
And I hope the Trump administration does more to bring that about because they're, I mean, they could use RICO, for instance. There's great collusion between these groups that are promoting violence. And some of their rhetoric, look at Black Lives Matter. I mean, they started by two Marxist women, and they openly advocate violence and overthrowing the white power structure and so forth, and they helped instigate riots that cost America plenty just 5 years ago. I wrote a law review article for the Liberty University Law Review a few years ago entitled "How Sexual Orientation Laws Threaten Religious Liberty." And I spelled out how the very concept of sexual orientation is quite radical. It's basically saying that what's in your head is more important than your biological makeup, and that uh, sexual orientation is fixed. It's funny they've abandoned that with the transgender. They say, "Oh, it's fluid now, and a boy can be a girl and vice versa." They keep jumping like a frog from lily pad to lily pad to another legal stance to keep justifying their legal hegemony over other people who disagree with them. But the sexual orientation says that uh, God really didn't create the two sexes. that God's plan for humanity, which includes marriage between male and female, is meaningless, and that if you say that there is a God and God did intend these, and the law should conform to the divine order of things, then you're a bigot. We've redefined it. And Sexual orientation was a brilliant stroke by the gay activist movement to bring about a sea change in how we view these things. And it led to the adoption of sexual behavior as a protected civil right. And the Supreme Court unfortunately bought into this a few years ago in the was it Bostock decision, where Neil Gorsuch surprised a lot of us by authoring it, and it basically raised gender identity and sexual orientation to a federally protected class. This had never happened before. In Congress, efforts to do this were repeatedly defeated. Um, and so the court once again broke new ground and created a different value system out of whole cloth. If you can't cite precedent for a Supreme Court decision, you have to go back in the United States' history and say this is a long-standing cultural view or so and forth. They didn't have that. We didn't have two guys getting married years ago. There's been no precedent for that, except maybe going back to the Emperor Nero, who I guess married his horse, but that's another.
That was
Uh,
Caligula, I
that was
think.
Caligula? No, I
And
think
Caligula,
Nero.
oh, Nero married, well,
I think
Caligula
Nero.
put his horse as
Yeah,
a tribune or a senator or something like. Let me
yeah.
focus on this a little bit. I want to go the other way. My point is Christianity is on the defensive now. Christianity is being persecuted now, and Christians are being killed for being Christian in the United States. Unbelievable
No doubt
to
about it.
me that there's
Yeah,
isn't the
no doubt
precise
about it.
purpose of civil rights laws to protect the rights of people to live civilly and have equal rights, whether they're Christian or not Christian. In other words, is the Christian community understanding that the death of Charlie Kirk is a signal that it's going to move from whatever you said to embracing homosexuality, affirming it, to persecuting Christians?
Yeah, we're already there. I mean, Jack Phillips and there's several other cases are evidence of that they'll use the power of the government to force
But
acceptance of their view.
are Christians prepared? For instance, I talked to Bill Donahue at the Catholic League about this terrible shooting at a Catholic school in Minneapolis a few weeks ago, and he's talked about the President's Commission on religious liberty or something like that. The president spoke there recently, and he said, "Well, I wanted to have a task force on anti-Catholic, and nobody's doing it, but they sent me to somebody in the Justice Department." And I met with somebody in the Justice Department, but I don't know what's happening. And I said, I'm surprised, you're not given a task force and said, go do. You're involved with evangelical Christians. There's a great deal of hate directed against evangelical Christians. Bondi got in trouble for saying hate speech, but certainly hate crimes, it is something in some laws if it's an aggravating condition. Is this something where you are working with anyone from the Trump administration, either in the religious liberty working group or the Justice Department? Has anybody contacted you?
Just an ink-stained journalist. I write. I'm an independent contractor. I write for a number of places, and I don't really do the kind of activism I did years ago with Family
No,
Research
I
Council.
understand you're not
Uh,
doing any activism. That's different. But
no, I'm
look,
not.
it's in your Wikipedia biography. You were instrumental in getting the passage of the Defense of Marriage Act. Okay,
That is
so
true. That is true. We drafted it. The first
what
draft was
you're
drafted.
telling me nobody from the Trump administration is contacting you.
No, no, I've not talked to anybody in the Trump administration. I mean, I hope they read my stuff. I have talked to activists who have deep ties with the Trump administration, who have said, we read your column every week and
Oh,
we
okay.
appreciate it. And, you know,
So
that's about
you,
as far as it goes. I have the platform of the Washington Times, um, and occasionally, like interviews like this, I do some Christian talk radio shows. Um, I'm out there a bit, but I'm no longer debating on campuses like I was. In fact, I did a lot of what Charlie did. I was at many campuses: Cornell, Kent State, University of South Carolina, um, oh, many campuses, and I debated the marriage issue and the hostility at some of the campuses was profound. At Kent State, that was the worst. And my poor wife was there to watch as the audience just was very abusive and screaming, and the hatred was overflowing. And I was just defending marriage. And as I got off stage, a guy came running up to me and pointed his finger at my head like he wanted to shoot me. And luckily, it was just a pretend. But in Charlie's case, no, they did the real deed. And it's not that they didn't want to when I was confronting them, but thank God they didn't have that.
yeah, I think in those days they didn't dare do it. I used to work for David Horowitz. He went around campuses and
Yeah.
he had threats. He had a bodyguard who was paid for by his wealthy son, who was in those days quite liberal. My understanding is now he's not as liberal as he used to be.
Oh, wow.
And I always wondered if that was an exaggeration or if he really needed the bodyguard. Because, you know, when I grew up at campus, you're talk about a safe space. It was a safe space to debate the issues and have different points of view and come to
That's
your
the
own conclusion.
idea.
That was the purpose of a liberal education. So, safe space now means safe space for party
Only for
indoctrination,
leftist views. Yeah,
whatever the line is. And
yep,
any deviation is not allowed. And it seems there's a
right.
death penalty. I mean, this is literally Soviet level, Chinese communist level, Pol Pot level, Cuba level, any communist revolution where if you deviate from the party line, I mean, Charlie Kirk, you see, what's so interesting to me is he represented lots of people on campus who no one ever got mad at because they were just, you know, all American kids. And, you know, I mean, I would even go so far as it's not only a civil rights violation due to freedom of religion, but it was due to nationality. He was being targeted as being American, that the anti American hate crime is equally a civil rights violation. You can't go after Americans for being American nationality or American citizens or defending America any more than anything else. I mean, you can't say that you have no rights as an American because you're pro-American, and that's equally disturbing. That I think you understood in advance. You said, did you actually ever get any death threats other than that one?
Of course. I
You
got them
did.
online all the time because I did so much debating. I did all the major news shows, and um, I even did well, CBS. Uh, there's a whole other side of my work when I took on Alfred Kinsey and made videos about his abusive use of data from the abuse of children to form the idea of child sexuality, which became the basis for sex education in this country. It's an amazing story, and it's disturbing. And the I imagine the Kinsey Institute, the Indiana University, is still pushing it. But the other than perhaps climate science and the suppression of any vote fraud irregularities that were reported in 2020. I don't think I've ever seen such one-sided so-called science as in the so-called studies that created the foundation of the whole gay rights movement. Every study they trotted out was deeply flawed. And I did a paper on it for Concerned Women for America. I went and got the actual studies, looked at them, I got some scientific input from uh, credentialed people, and they said, well, these don't hold water at all. There are only 15 subjects in the study, and yet there's the New York Times saying study shows, you're born gay and things like that. And these have never been replicated. They're the shoddiest science you can imagine, the brain studies and so forth. And yet they created a the paradigm that people are born gay and therefore it's just like being born black. So therefore we can use all the civil rights apparatus to enforce whatever the gays want. I mean, that's what's happened. But now you're getting the pushback because they went too far.
But what
When
I'm
we're
asking you
creating,
is there a strategy on the other side to protect Christians using the same techniques that the anti-Christians have used?
only the sense that the Christian civil rights organizations are very aggressively using the civil rights laws, as you mentioned,
Okay.
to fight back. But this is all defensive. I'm tired of being on defense. I like the idea that the Trump administration says, look, we're going to, instead of keep defending against these abuses, we're going to prosecute those who are doing the abuses. I think that's a change of events, and I think it's quite welcome. And of course, it all has to be within the law, and I trust that it will be. Uh, we can't do some things that the left does, which is we're not going to resort to violence. We're not going to resort to intimidation the way they do. They shut people up and censored people across the board from campuses to social media. That's not what I'm talking about doing. I'm talking about actionable, pursuing actionable charges against people who have broken the law and incited violence, perhaps. This isn't just hate speech. Hate speech is protected. I will agree with Charlie Kirk about that. Charlie knew some speech is not only disgusting, but even dangerous, but it's protected speech unless it crosses the line into actual incitement of violence. Of course, the left has a very low threshold for that. You just disagree with them and you're creating violence. You're being violent.
Although it's a
And that
complete double standard. It's a double
oh,
standard
completely.
because
Yes.
if you're creating violence, but they'll even say silence is violence if it's you.
Yes, if you don't go
But
along with them, you're being violent. It's
your speech is violent. My violence is speech and therefore protected. So,
well
in other
said.
words, if I shoot somebody, that's just free speech. If I burn something down, that's free speech. If I beat someone
Yeah.
up, that's free speech. If I tear down your table on campus, that's just free speech. If I throw a Molotov cocktail into your house, that's free speech.
Okay. What, Larry?
And
We've gone beyond the heckler's veto, which is illegal, by the way. That's not free speech. When you shut down a speaker, that's called the heckler's veto, and the courts have said you can't fall back on that. But now we've moved to the assassin's veto, which is far more disturbing.
we'll talk about a chilling effect. I mean, I watched.
I'm going to have to go
Okay,
because I've got to
all right.
help my
We'll
wife.
wrap it up. Thank you very
Okay.
much for all you're doing, and may God keep you safe under
Thank you.
His canopy of peace. And I look forward to following your articles in the Washington Times on this. And let's hope that Charlie Kirk's memory becomes, as his widow said, a rallying cry in the years to come. So thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
All right. Thank you for having me, Larry. God bless you too.